Okay, we're going to go through five uh, classic attempts to respond to the global skepticism that we saw in Descartes or in the simulation hypothesis, right? How do we know we're not at the mercy of an evil demon? How do we know we're not in a dream? How do we know we're not in a virtual reality simulation, right? So here's these responses. First, we're going to look at is from G.E. Moore. So G.E. Moore responds to Descartes in the following way. He goes, here's a hand, and here's another hand. I thus disprove Descartes. And then he sits down, right? Um, that's his argument. So how do I know I'm not at the mercy of an evil demon? Look, I've got hands. I know something about the external world. That sounds just dismissal at best, right? Asinine, or something like what's going on here? Like, how is that possibly a remotely plausible argument? So a lot of people think what Moore is doing here is he's challenging the way Descartes has set up this whole debate to begin with, right? He's challenging the global skeptic. He says, well, Descartes' method is something like, look, if I have any reasonable doubt, any reasonable grounds for doubting something, I'm just going to throw it out. I don't really know it. My senses are often deceived. I might be asleep in my armchair, so here I think I see a hand, but really, that could be a hallucination or I could be dreaming, right? So I don't know I have hands. That's basically the structure of his argument. And what Moore is saying is, I just don't think that that's a productive way to think about things. And in fact, the exact opposite way of sort of setting stuff up is probably just as plausible. Um, we don't need to start from the assumption that we, we should doubt our very perceptions, right? Um, the skeptical hypothesis that everything is a mere projection of our mind, well, sure, it's a logical possibility, but is it one worth taking seriously? Moore's going to say, well, no, there's no concrete evidence to think that we should seriously consider our hands as maybe not existing or maybe being hallucination. And without sort of like a compelling reason to take that seriously, it's more plausible to start from the assumption that, well, at least we know we have hands and then sort of go from there, right? So maybe what he's saying is something like this. Unless we have compelling reason to take the non existence of our hands seriously, we are being more, not less rational, starting from the assumption that, well, our hands exist. And so there's an external reality, and then sort of going from those assumptions to see what we can discover about things. He thinks it's more productive to start there than it would be to go, I don't even know if I have hands, and then try to figure out something about reality. That's roughly his argument. You can think it is as plausible as you want to think it is. The simulation people today, right? The people that say, hey, look, there's a good chance we're in a virtual reality simulation. And so the hands that you think you have are nothing other than virtual objects, right? You might think that does give you some reason to doubt the existence of your hands, right? To the extent that any of these kind of arguments really do sort of provide a framework for thinking, yeah, okay, yeah, I could see it's possible that I'm in a world where I don't even know if my hands exist. Well, Moore's argument's not going to work for you there, right? But if you agree with Moore's sort of assumption there that there isn't really any compelling reason to take that doubt seriously other than as a philosophical exercise, well, maybe he's got a point. Second, we're going to look at Bertrand Russell and his attempt to respond to this. So Bertrand Russell, roughly, he says he appeals to abduction, right? Something like reflective equilibrium, right? He says, look, I've got the following sense data. My sense data says that this and this and this are the case, right? That I'm in a physical world, that it's roughly like this, that these are the physics of it, that I have hands and no hair, all that kind of stuff. Now, why do I have that sense data? Well, one possibility is that I'm in a virtual reality simulation, or there's an evil demon out to get me, or that I'm, like just a prisoner in a cave looking at shadows. Those are all possibilities. It's also possible that I just exist in a physical world of more or less permanent material objects, and they are having an impact on my senses, and I'm perceiving them, right? That is a possible explanation for why I think I observe hands. Now, what's the best explanation for why I think that? Well, he thinks via reflective equilibrium. it's likely, the most likely explanation is just that I inhabit like a material world and that my observations are at least semi-reliably tracking that world. More plausible than that I'm in a virtual simulation and radically deceived. So that's his response. There's a long tradition. So I guess David Hume, Thomas Reid, Charles Peirce, they all say something like the following, roughly, that our beliefs in an external world are innocent until proven guilty, right? So our natural beliefs about how reality is, like that there's a physical world out there that we're interacting with and it's external to us and we're observing it. It's not, say, a delusion or a hallucination or an evil demon deceiving us or even a virtual world. Those beliefs that the world is roughly as we perceive it, Hume thinks are sort of innocent until proven guilty. A reasonable person is justified in believing that their natural beliefs are roughly true, right? Or tracking reality as it roughly is, and then using that as a resource for further inquiry and for further interacting with the world, unless they've got some reason to seriously consider that they are false, right? So Hume recognizes something like the way in which we sort of talk about and think about reality is roughly tentative, right? So the theories we build about the natural world are tentative. They're, empirically adequate. Given the evidence available to us, these are reasonable ways to think about the world. And unless there's some compelling reason to start challenging those theories, we should tentatively endorse them, but recognizing that knowledge itself is tentative, right? So I perceive myself as having hands. I recognize I could be radically wrong about that, but it's not a doubt worth taking seriously unless there's really compelling reason to think I should start doubting that hypothesis, right? So it's deflationary about knowledge. Knowledge itself is tentative. But that's okay, right? If there's not a compelling reason to doubt, don't doubt. That's roughly the response. More contemporary, I guess, David Chalmers, right? And Chalmers is very much responding to the virtual reality kind of stuff, right? So he's taking the global skepticism stuff seriously, but what he's got in mind is less Descartes' demon and more, maybe we are in a simulation. And he just bites the bullet, right? Chalmers says, strictly speaking, we can't know that we are in a virtual simulation. And in fact, given arguments like the simulation argument, there's a reasonable chance we are in a simulation. But that's okay. We shouldn't be concerned too much about it, and we shouldn't really be worried about it. He thinks what that would change is fundamental physics, right? Like if we are in a virtual reality simulation, then the way we think about the fundamental nature of reality is different, right? At bottom, it's maybe not particles, it's, ones and zeros or something like that, right? But we can still know all sorts of things about the virtual reality simulation, right? Like we can still know, like in this simulation, I have hands, right? Like that's true. My avatar has hands and doesn't have hair and, all that kind of stuff. And I can learn all those facts about that. And I can learn facts about the way the simulation is set up. I can learn about the other beings and creatures in it, and I can learn about the physics of that simulation. I can learn all about the world. So he thinks nothing would really change that has any impact on how we would live our lives or what we can or can't know. It just turns out like there's this deeper layer of reality where if you lifted the veil, things would be radically different than they are. But unless there's sort of some path within the simulation to observing that, we'd have no way of knowing that, right? And so it's not a problem we should take too seriously or lose sleep over. That's his response. Then finally, this is an argument that comes from Lucy Irigaray, Susan Bordeaux. They both respond to Cartesian skepticism, this kind of global skeptical worry that we might not even know we have hands, right? And they say this comes from a place of privilege. Their argument is, right? It comes from, they say, the maleness of Cartesian reasoning. The thought here is there's this really easy ability in a thinker like Descartes to separate his body and the natural world from his mind and like the reasoner, right? And he's able to do that because he doesn't face oppression of any interesting sense, right? So the argument here is, look, an oppressed person knows, if they know anything else, that their body is real and that there is a world external to them that is interacting with them, that is oppressing them, that is stopping them from sort of being free, and that in ways that they maybe want to be. And that is the fundamental, right? That's something they can't deny because they experience it. So to even sort of get into the kind of inquiry that the global skeptic has in mind, somebody like Uruguay or Bordeaux says, you have to sort of be immune from, an oppression by an other, and you have to, be in a place where you can doubt the existence of your own body. But their argument is, look, some people are situated so that recognizing that their body exists and others interact with and oppress it is more fundamental than their ability to sort of think of their mind abstracted away from their body as a thing that is. So I guess the response to global skepticism here is, this comes from a certain kind of privilege and having a certain kind of perspective that allows you to think of your existence and your reason as potentially disconnected from an external world that interacts with your physical body. And their claim is, lots of people just don't have that perspective because they are oppressed by a world, and they know day to day, if they know anything, that they are part of the world and others are interacting with them. So there's their concern. Have a good one.